Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And this video, all in all, is going to be that by Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation. And the reason why I thought that I would review this little video is because I found it very particularly interesting. Not only am I going to use this video to maybe expose certain narratives or certain ploys or certain plans overall that Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation has with certain assets a little bit later on down the line, but also I am going to be talking about my in-depth breakdown of the chances that I think that Mr. Keith One Time Thurman has of actually making a decent comeback. And when I say making a decent comeback, I'm talking about actually competing very decently for being, debatably the number one welterweight in the world. Because if Keith Thurman does truly plan to grab the titles once again, or a title once again in the welterweight division, he is going to have to defeat two of the best top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. One of those fighters, of course, being Mr. Errol Spence Jr., I believe from Houston, Texas, or if he's not from Houston, or maybe he's from Dallas, actually. I can't remember, but the man from Texas. And then, of course, you have Mr. Terence Crawford from Omaha, Nebraska. And either of those fights, in my opinion, for Keith One Time Thurman, they would not be easy. And to be quite honest with you, in my opinion, I'm not quite so sure if I would favor Keith Thurman in either of those fights. To be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure if I would give him any more than a 30% chance. But, there's really no gripe with trying. There's really no overall bad thing in terms of trying to get back on top. Or maybe Keith Thurman, maybe he also realizes that, if I want to continue, that, not only maybe would it be possibly good for my legacy if I can win the fight, but on top of that, it would be a good paycheck. And I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later on as well. But anyways, let's see what Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation had to say. Let's get into it.
So whoever's willing to send Keith Thurman a contract, let's go, baby. Let's go.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Keith Thurman, he gets to win a unanimous decision win over a very game Mario Barrios. This was a perfect matchup for both fighters, for Keith Thurman and...
I love when Dante's Boxing Nation, and it's no offense against Dante. I don't have a problem with people that have their own platform, but it's no offense against Dante. But these LDBC and new media dudes, at least a lot of them, you can tell that a lot of these dudes, they're just shills. It just is what it is. There's no way that a lot of these guys truly believe in a lot of the bullshit that they're saying. I mean, just right off the bat, a very game Mario Barrios. Come on, dude. A very game Mario Barrios. There was a reason why there was about 10,000 empty seats yesterday in the crowds. No one truly thought that this was a good fight. I promise you, if this maybe would have been a Keith Thurman versus Danny Garcia rematch, there would have been a lot of people that would have somewhat bought this pay-per-view. I didn't even think that I was going to buy the pay-per-view yesterday, but because there literally was almost nothing on when it came down to it, I basically said, hey, why not? And on top of that, maybe a certain amount of people, they may want to hear my review. And on top of that, of course, Keith Thurman, he said that he allegedly wants Terence Crawford next, which I think is a very decent fight because, of course, Keith Thurman, he still looks like he's at a decent point in his career. I just don't think that he's going to have enough to beat Terence Crawford. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think that Keith One Time Thurman, I don't even think that he looks as dominant as what he did against a Danny Garcia or a Sean Porter. And, of course, you somewhat expect that. He's had a multitude of injuries. On top of that, he was out for 3 years. Who knows? Maybe if he faces Terence Crawford, maybe he'll look even better, but I doubt it. And to be quite honest with you, I think that if you're talking about a fight that is the most dangerous matchup for Keith One Time Thurman, I think that Terence Crawford is the worst possible matchup for Keith One Time Thurman. In my opinion, literally the only chance Keith One Time Thurman will have against Terence Crawford, he has to make it ugly. And he has to really, really, really hope that he can land on Terence Crawford early and maybe catch him with something, maybe knock him down early. Then maybe he'll have a chance. But other than that, I just don't see how he's going to beat Terence Crawford. That's just my personal opinion. I can tell that Keith Thurman, when he's boxing, the boxing intelligence is still there. He can, he's a person that, I mean, I don't even know really how to compare him. He's almost like the Russell Wilson of boxing. And a certain amount of people I don't know, they'll be like, well, why would you make that comparison? Because Russell Wilson, when you take a look at him, it's very obvious that he's a very intelligent NFL quarterback. He's a very intelligent NFL player. But when you compare him to that of an Aaron Rodgers or a Patrick Mahomes or a Drew Brees, he may overall, in my opinion, even have to be slightly below them. Because in my opinion, there's just certain things that they can come up with bigger, especially in the playoffs overall, than what he can. Keith Thurman, you can tell that a lot of the times, especially on autopilot mode, a lot of the boxing IQ is there. But if you're talking about him facing off with the creme de la creme, if you're talking about him facing off with Errol Spence Jr. or Terence Bud Crawford or even Manny Pacquiao, a fighter that was finally able to exploit a lot of his faults within that one, fight that happened a few years back, I'm not quite so sure if Keith One Time Thurman is going to defeat any of those fighters. And I don't think that he is going to have a legitimate chance over Terence Bud Crawford. I just don't see it. I mean, Keith Thurman, the way that he boxes, it's not that I think that he's a bad boxer, but what he's always reminded me of, he's like a greater version of Claressa Shields. That's what he reminds me of. Both of those fighters, actually, in my opinion, they somewhat fight similarly. But Keith Thurman, of course, has to be on a higher level than what Claressa Shields would be because there's no offense against Claressa or women's boxing, but I just don't know any of those damn chicks that she's facing. It is what it is. To be honest with you, I don't even know if Claressa Shields is quite as talented as what Amanda Serrano is. And of course, that Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano fight is going to happen. I'll have to do my in-depth breakdown. I don't really watch a whole lot of women's boxing, but I'll have to watch a few of their matches, do more of an in-depth breakdown. But just taking a look at it on the surface, what would my, one-dimensional prediction be overall without taking a, huge look at it? Probably would be Amanda Serrano. She looks like she has more power, more boxing ability, and she's not a Canelo Alvarez by any means, but she can hurt you, and she can box. But we'll see, all know what happens. But that's what Keith One Time Thurman really reminds me of. He reminds me of a greater, a stronger, more athletic version, and of course he's a man, so you expect that. He reminds me overall of a greater Claressa Shields. Both of those fighters, they move around the ring quite a lot. They fight a little bit somewhat defensively. I don't think that they always have the greatest of feet, but they have good enough feet all in all to usually outbox most of the opponents that they're going to face, especially opponents that usually do not have the same athletic gifts that they do. But when they do face an opponent that has not only the same athletic gifts that they do, but also very high boxing IQ and a high boxing skill set, they're going to be in some trouble. It just is what it is. And that's why Claressa Shields, even in some of her fights, she's been knocked down before. She's been hit a couple of times because neither Claressa Shields or Keith Thurman, they're not really known to be super duper defensively responsible. It's not that he's super bad on the defensive end. He's just not super duper great. He's not a Floyd Mayweather Jr. I don't even think that he's a Terence Bud Crawford. And in my opinion, Terence Bud Crawford, he's also not a Pernell Sweepy Whitaker or Floyd Mayweather Jr. on the defensive end either. Keith Thurman, a big problem with him is that not only sometimes can he swing a little bit wildly, flat-footed as well, when it comes down to which can make him get caught in certain combinations. But if you remember that first knockdown the knockdown in the Manny Pacquiao fight, the one that happened in round one, the reason why Manny Pacquiao was able to get that is because, and I've always noticed this with Keith Thurman, whenever he backs up, whenever he's on the move, whenever he's on the defensive mode, his hands are always down. And some boxers do that because they believe that they're moving faster, which I get it, that's good. But, if you're going to keep your hands down, in my opinion, you should always somewhat keep your hands up, even if they're not completely up to your face, somewhat keep them in the range by your face when it comes down to, or by your head. If you're going to do that, all in all, you have to really make sure that they're not within your zone, or that all in all, that you use a hell of a lot of lateral movement. And Keith will use lateral movement. I just think all in all, because of his not so super duper great feet, that sometimes it limits him. But we'll see what happens. But Keith Thurman, in my opinion, if he faces a Terence Bud Crawford or that of an Errol Spence Jr., he's going to be facing fighters, in my opinion, that not only are decently more skilled than him, but they're pretty much just as great at that as athletes as him, if not greater. I don't see how Keith Thurman really beats them.
Mario Barrios, both coming off of losses. Keith Thurman had been out of the ring for 2 years. He wasn't going in there against someone who had no chance. Mario Barrios is no Maca.
Yes, he was, man. Come on. Who is Mario Barrios? This dude is acting like Mario Barrios is like some Danny Garcia or Virgil Ortiz or some shit. Like, come on.
Or no Emmanuel Tagbu or Tago, Tago, whatever his name is, because that's...
And of course, Dante's Boxing Nation once again mentions the Canelo Alvarez opponent, Ilunga Makabu. I don't think that he's the greatest opponent, but what I'll say is this. He at least was a legitimate champion for his division. He still is. He actually has the legitimate WBC title. But if you were to somewhat compare Ilunga Makabu to that of a Mario Barrios, I actually think that would be somewhat of an accurate comparison. The Gervonta Tank Davis versus Mario Barrios fight, in my opinion, that's kind of what the Canelo Alvarez versus Ilunga Makabu fight would be. He's not someone that is super duper A grade, but it's an interesting fight because it's a person that has a little bit of power. You know that that person is going to be outskilled by the opponent, such as a Canelo Alvarez or a Gervonta Tank Davis, but you want to see how the fight is going to go because you want to see how they handle that size. And in my opinion, more than likely, the Canelo versus Makabu fight, it pretty much would be almost like a worse version of Gervonta Tank Davis. versus overall Ilunga Makabu. Or a better version if you want to say that, because Makabu actually was a legitimate champion, while Mario Barrios, he really was not a legitimate champion, but it is what it is.
Ryan Garcia's next.
Mario Barrios is going to be another one of these dudes that, he's just going to be another Sergey Lipinets, or I don't even know if I would compare him to that. He's just going to be another one of these guys that, he pretty much he pretty much is going to get phased out very, very quickly. He's pretty much going to be known as just a gatekeeper. He's never going to be the creme de la creme. He's never going to be an A-grade fighter. And eventually he's probably going to get promoted to C-grade fighter, or not promoted, but degraded to C-grade fighter. Right now, I would say that he's about a B to B minus fighter. But to be quite honest with you, I'm not even sure if he's on that level. I've never been overly impressed with Mario Barrios, but it is what it is. Anyway.
Opponent is someone who literally has no type of fighting chance. Perhaps I'll talk more about that in a separate video. So not only did Mario Barrios have...
And notice that they always talk about Mr. Ryan Garcia. So that's them basically admitting the fact that they always talk about him. They know that Ryan Garcia has a lot of star appeal. And I'm not a person that's always huge on Ryan Garcia either. It's not that I don't like the kid, but Ryan Garcia is eventually going to have to step in the ring with someone that actually has a pulse. It is what it is. I think the Luke Campbell fight for him was very, very good. I don't necessarily know who this next opponent is. I don't necessarily have a huge problem with it because, kind of like the Keith Thurman one, he's coming off of an injury and he's coming off of a very, very long layoff. But after that, hopefully Ryan Garcia can get in the ring with a very high contender. But we'll see what happens.
Chance in this fight against Keith Thurman, but he actually managed to hurt Keith Thurman multiple times in the fight. Keith Thurman, the good news for Keith Thurman is he looked like the old...
I seen Mario Barrios hurt Keith Thurman, I think, once. Keith Thurman overall, he was breathing heavy, and it was very obvious that he got hit with a body shot. Keith Thurman is not very excellent defensively to the body, and he overall does not have a lot of toughness towards the body. If you overall have a very early body attack against Keith Thurman, you can get to him. Even Manny Pacquiao, who's not a huge body puncher, he was able to get Keith Thurman. He nearly dropped Keith Thurman on his ass, I believe, in one of those latter rounds because he hit him with an excellent liver shot. Keith Thurman almost wanted to go down. He spit his mouthpiece into his hand. He was about ready to go down. So if Errol Spence or Terence Crawford, who in my opinion, they love to go to the body, and they're excellent counter punchers, in my opinion, especially Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford will literally, he uses what I like to call the art of momentum, or the law of inertia when it comes down to it, I believe overall is what I'm saying. Or maybe maybe I'm thinking wrong. But basically what I mean here is that, what Terence Crawford knows how to do, he knows how to set you up for traps. Errol Spence does to a degree, but I think that Terence Crawford, in terms of setting up someone for traps, especially on the back foot, I think that he's just so much better at it. And kind of like, again, against Sean Porter or whatever opponent, he'll go back and then basically he'll stop at a certain moment in time, and he knows that you're going to chase after him, and he'll let your body momentum basically slam into one of his punches. He loves to do that with a lot of his body shots. And you can tell that he has some major, super painful body shots. If Keith Thurman gets hit by one of those, good luck.
Keith Thurman. He looked like the Thurman before he lost to Manny Pacquiao. He looked fresh. He was energetic. He looked explosive. But like the old Keith Thurman, he was hurt to the body in this fight.
He looked like the Keith Thurman before Manny Pacquiao. So basically, what is that him doing? That's trying to degrade someone of Manny Pacquiao's win, at least possibly, when it comes down to it. And then basically, he's going to try to allege that Keith Thurman, that when he, faces Terence Crawford, Crawford faced him at his best. But are you going to mention the same point like you mentioned with Canelo Alvarez? He fought a fighter that already had a loss and wasn't even a champion, blah, 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 blah. Are you going to mention that? I highly doubt it. But like I said, that's how you know that Terence Crawford, he's a very big asset for them. Like I said, a lot of people that come to my channel, they'll say, they just say the things about Canelo because, they believe that he's ducking. No, that's not why they say that's not why they say things about Canelo at all. If Canelo was their own complexion, they would be talking about him completely differently. It would be a complete 180.
He took his foot off the gas pedal in the later rounds and kind of cruised to the finish line. And although he dominated this performance, at least on the scorecards, the fact that Keith Thurman is a natural welterweight and he's known for his power and couldn't knock out Mario Barrios, it makes the Tank Davis knockout win over Mario Barrios even more impressive. It was all...
I think if Keith Thurman really tried, or if he really, really would have put his foot to the metal, I think he probably could have knocked out Mario Barrios somewhere within about 10 rounds. But I think Keith Thurman said, you know what, this kid does have a little bit of power. He is decently big when it comes down to it, maybe even a little bit bigger than what he expected. He said, you know what, this is my comeback fight. This is my ticket to possibly get a big fight. Let me not fuck this up. Maybe all in all, I should just keep boxing the way that I'm doing. Maybe it's better tonight if I just play it safe. So I think if Keith Thurman would have really stepped on the gas, that he probably could have knocked him out. That's not me trying to degrade Gervonta Tank Davis's knockout, but what I am saying is this. I'm not super duper surprised that Gervonta Tank Davis was able to knock out Mario Barrios and Keith Thurman was not. Because Gervonta Tank Davis, there's even a possibility, and I know some people, they're going to say that, this is ridiculous. There's some fighters that, when they're in those lower weight classes, or, even if, they're not as heavy as some of those other fighters, they may be able to punch about 2 to 3 times overall to what their actual weight class actually is. There were certain people all in all that, they used to say about Marvin Hagler that he used to punch like a light heavyweight. There were certain people that said about Gennady Golovkin, they were said, wow, this dude would punch like a light heavyweight. This dude would punch sometimes even like a heavyweight or a cruiserweight. That's how powerful his punches would be. When it comes to Canelo Alvarez, he's very similar to Gervonta Tank Davis. He has a very great build overall for his divisions when it comes down to, yes, he may be shorter, he may be stouter, he may not have the reach, but he has defense when it comes down to, he has the skills, and he has that power. Every time Canelo Alvarez hits you, you're going to feel it. It's the same thing with Gervonta Tank Davis. So even though it sounds crazy, there's a possibility that at least at this point in time in their careers, Gervonta, he may have just as much power as a Keith one-time Thurman. A lot of people, of course, are going to view that as crazy. They're going to say, oh, what are you talking about? He wasn't even able to knock out Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Well, that's true, but Isaac Pitbull Cruz, I think overall he also caught Gervonta Tank Davis when he did break his left hand, but it is what it is. But Gervonta Tank Davis can punch. There's no doubt about it. I remember when he knocked out Leo Santa Cruz with that one left uppercut. And Leo Santa Cruz, I don't even think I've ever remembered him being knocked down before in his career. So Gervonta Tank Davis, he just has that type of power that is it's just on a different level.
Already impressive before.
And on top of that, Gervonta Tank Davis, in my opinion, he's more talented and more skilled and just a smarter boxer and a more fundamental boxer than what Keith one-time Thurman ever was. Yes, they both overall have great athleticism and they probably rely on it to a certain degree. But when I take a look at Gervonta Tank Davis, he's better, defensively. He has sharper punches. He has way better feet, in my opinion, when it comes down to way better punch resistance and even decently more power for his weight division than what Keith one-time Thurman does. So it's almost like the Terence Crawford versus Sean Porter situation. Errol Spence and Danny Garcia and Dana Sugas and a lot of these guys, no one is ever able to knock out Sean Porter before. But once you finally get in with that different breed of fighter, even compared to some of those other elite fighters that you fought, their punch placement, their counter punches, and their boxing IQ, combined with their athleticism and power, they can knock you the spark out, man. It is what it is. It's almost like, Jamal Charlo, if he got in the ring overall with, say, Caleb Plant, there's a decent chance that maybe he would not knock him out. But Canelo could. It just is what it is. And that's not me saying that 100% it would have not happened, but, just saying.
Because
just saying hypothetically.
Gervonta had moved up in weight. But watching the Thurman Barrios fight makes the Gervonta Tank Davis fight even more impressive to win. If Keith Thurman had that gear that Gervonta Tank Davis has, which is...
Well, what I'll say is this. I think that it was good that Gervonta Tank Davis was able to get that knockout. And that also may have been another strategy overall of Al Heyman to build Gervonta Tank Davis's brand, maybe also. So I think that could have been a win-win. Now, some people overall, they may disagree there, but... Also, if Keith one-time Thurman, if he can't knock out Mario Barrios, Gervonta Tank Davis, all of a sudden, he looks like a greater fighter. Because Keith one-time Thurman, of course, is a natural welterweight. Even at one point in time, fought at 154. So, it is what it is. But when it comes down to it all in all, I was pretty decently impressed with Keith Thurman. I just don't know if I've seen enough for him to defeat a Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr.
To fight on the inside and the high guard, Keith Thurman would have easily got the knockout. But what Keith likes to do, this is his style. He likes to jump in and out with pot shots. Either lead right hands or lead left hooks. And it's always about a good 2-punch combination. He usually doesn't throw more than 2 punches. He'll either jump in with 1 or 2 punches, but once he does that, he jumps back out. He doesn't want to be in position to be hit with a counter shot. This is the reason why Keith Thurman didn't get the knockout. Keith Thurman is not an inside fighter. He does not walk.
I would somewhat agree with that. I would say the reason why Keith Thurman did not get the knockout is because he was not willing to try to go for the knockout in the latter rounds. Because there were several times where he hurt Mario Barrios very, very badly in this fight, and it looked like he was like he wasn't going to last. But I think Keith Thurman said, you know what, let me just keep doing my thing. Let me overall not, take any huge risks here that aren't calculated. Because I don't want to get knocked out in this fight, or I don't possibly want to run into something.
Down opponents. Keith Thurman, he hurt Mario Barrios multiple times in this fight, far more times than Mario hurt Thurman, but he didn't take advantage of it. Now, when it comes to Mario Barrios, he was actually a little gun shy after the first couple of rounds in this fight. Every time Mario threw punches with confidence.
Of course, because Mario Barrios, he was basically getting teed off on from round one. He was feeling that power. What the hell was he going to do? And Mario Barrios, he's not a person that, just goes in there and throws, punches and bunches. Let me also state this for a certain amount of the people that have commented on my channel or asked me about the David Benavidez versus Canelo Alvarez situation. Excuse me. Because a certain amount of people may ask me, well, do you think David Benavidez versus Canelo Alvarez is a great fight? And once again, a lot of people, of course, will come to this channel. They'll think that I'm some Canelo Alvarez protector or that I'm some Canelo Alvarez fanboy. That is not the case. But like I said, I know what I see when I see Canelo Alvarez. That is a creme de la creme fighter. And Canelo Alvarez versus David Benavidez, I think that it's a very interesting matchup for however long it lasts. And it may last the whole entire fight. Who knows? But David Benavidez, there's a certain amount of people that say, oh, well, David Benavidez, he's just going to go in there and, when it comes down to it, he's going to go to Canelo toe-to-toe, match his power, and, all in all, he's going to, break him down incrementally. That's great, but the problem is with David Benavidez is that really going to work? Because David Benavidez, first of all, you don't really have a great power. I know a lot of people, they'll say that, oh, that's not true. No, he does not have a great power. David Benavidez, he has enough power to knock you out with punches and bunches. Like I said, he's like the Max Holloway of boxing. Max Holloway in the UFC, he's not really going to knock you out usually with just one good punch, but because of his cardio and because of the punches and bunches and the combinations and the accumulation of punches, eventually he can get you. Now, there's certain, fighters that can punch you all day long and they still can't knock you out. When it comes down, Devin Haney is a person that does not have a whole lot of power, even though he has a little bit of power. I wouldn't say that he has horrible power. It's just not, devastating power like a Gervonta Tank Davis or a Vasily Lomachenko for those weight divisions, or maybe a Teofimo Lopez. But when it comes down to, like I said, when it comes to certain fighters, they just have that type of power. They don't. David Benavidez, I think that he's been able to bully a lot of fighters and intimidate them with their power because a lot of the fighters that he's fought back with, they don't have the type of power that he has and the size. But if you fight against Canelo, not only has he been used to that power, but he is going to be the most skilled fighter that you have ever fought. It's different between facing a punching bag like someone against Anthony Durrell, someone who's already somewhat mentally broken in his career, and someone all in all that is not going to be willing to throw a lot of exchanges with you in some of those tough fights. It just is what it is. But David Benavidez, like I said, facing someone like that and facing a Canelo Alvarez, it's completely different. It just is what it is. It's completely different. And the reason why it's completely different is because you're going to be facing a fighter for the first time that is more than likely going to be able to get past your plan A. Oh, wow, I'm not able to break this guy down like I was able to break this other guy, these other guys down. Wow, he's hurting me. Wow, he's punching me. He's getting through my defense a little bit. Now I have to fight this fight a little bit going backwards. I can't throw as much overall as what I used to. I'm getting hit in return. I'm getting hurt. When it comes down to what do I do here? So that's what I'm saying. I don't think that David Benavidez fight is just going to end up with David Benavidez charging in there and completely wearing Canelo Alvarez down the whole entire fight. Because Canelo is a person that, when it comes down to it, not only can he handle that power, he has more power than that of a David Benavidez. He also has a better chin. He also has better defense. So we'll see what happens.
And he was first. He did well. He actually landed a lot of punches. Mario started to let his hands go a little bit more towards the end, which prompted Keith Thurman to start moving around the ring more. And I noticed Keith Thurman, he didn't really have the most confident look on his face in those later rounds. It also may have something to do with his corner telling him the fight was extremely close, which it wasn't, but there were moments where Barrios, he did really well. So Keith Thurman, at the end of the day, he got the job done. I also give Keith Thurman a lot of credit for being honest when he gave his assessment on how he performed tonight. He said it was kind of like a C+. He admitted there were things that he needed to work on, and he's right.
I think all in all that it was a decent performance, actually, even a very, very good performance by Keith Thurman. But Keith Thurman is not going to defeat Terence Crawford. He's not going to defeat Errol Spence Jr. It just is what it is. He's not going to beat either of those guys if they come in at their best. I don't think that he has a legitimate chance. He has the same chance, in my opinion, that a Jamal Charlo has over Canelo Alvarez.
Especially if you're going to get in the ring with a Jerron Ennis, a Crawford, a Spence, even an Ugas. He's going to have to definitely work on things because he got hurt multiple times in this fight. He got hit with punches that he shouldn't have got hit with. He also should have been able to get this guy.
Well, that's been Keith Thurman for his whole entire career. There's never been a big fight that he's been in, or even a fight in general, where he hasn't got someone hurt or, haven't been able to pull through it. He got hurt against Luis Collazo, Josesito Lopez, even a little bit against Robert Guerrero, Danny Garcia, and, Showtime Sean Porter, or Sean Showtime Porter, whatever the hell it is. But when it comes down to, like I said, if he faces Terence Crawford, in my opinion, he's going to eat him up for lunch. But we'll see what happens.
Out of there. If you hurting this guy with almost every punch you hit him with. Keith Thurman also needs to start working on his inside game. As many fights as he has, I'm sure he knows how to do it. He's obviously just not comfortable doing it. And this is not something that you do all the time, every single round.
He can fight a little bit on the inside. I've seen him somewhat do it. But like I said, and this is why I compare him a little bit to that of Claressa Shields, they're mainly defensive first fighters. I'm not saying that they cannot get their offense off, but as soon as they do, they're backtracking. And I'm not saying that that's always necessarily a bad thing. If that's you, it's you. But you're going to be facing fighters like an Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford that they just have more ability than you. It just is what it is.
But certain times in a fight, it's necessary. And it was definitely necessary to work on the inside in this Mario Barrios.
And my question is, can Keith Thurman, even if he hits Terence Crawford or Errol Spence, which I'm not sure how likely he is to land flush a lot of the times in those fights, can he really back up Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford the way that he wants to? I don't know.
Fight. So we'll see.
And sometimes the more overall that you throw punches, sometimes the more open you are as well. At least if you don't have the movement or the defensive responsibility. And Keith Thurman, the more that he tends to throw punches, unfortunately for him, he tends to get hit a little bit more because he's one of those fighters that he's a little bit too open. He don't have the head movement of a Floyd Mayweather Jr. or he don't move in the right angles all the time. And he's a person all in all that, sometimes he can swing a little bit wildly. I don't see him beating Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr., to be quite honest with you. To be honest with you, it would be a miracle if Keith Thurman could even survive those fights.
See if Keith Thurman can improve, or we see the same one time in this very next fight. It'll be interesting to see who will send him a contract, who is interested in taking a fight. The one good thing about Keith Thurman is no matter win, lose, or draw, he's going to be in some really exciting fights because he's explosive and he has these vulnerabilities.
Is it really going to be an exciting fight with Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr.? It may be exciting for how long it lasts, but if he faces Terence Crawford especially, that fight, in my opinion, he's going to fold Keith Thurman like a lawn chair. It just is what it is. That's my opinion. If Keith Thurman let me not underestimate Keith Thurman, completely. I give him a 30% chance. He would be, in my opinion, the most intelligent boxer that Terence Crawford has ever fought. Now, Keith Thurman, in my opinion, does he have the skill set? Does he have the feet? Does he have the sharpness in his punches? Does he have the defensive responsibility or the head movement, the know-how on the inside and outside as a Terence Crawford? No, he doesn't. But when it comes down to it, he is a person that maybe all in all, if he can get Terence Crawford in a little bit of a firefight, maybe he can take advantage of it. Maybe he can catch Terence Crawford early. Maybe if he can get a knockdown, then maybe he can take Terence Crawford out of his game. I just don't see that happening because Terence Crawford, he has nerves of steel, and he can adapt on the fly extremely well.
Abilities, which means all of his fights will be filled with drama. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
Mrs. B's is all new with today.
Anyways, that's pretty much all I got for today. I just thought that was particularly interesting. If you're going to ask me who do I think Keith Thurman should fight next, well, that's up to him. In terms of monetary perspective and in terms of if you want to get back to the top, I think that a Terence Crawford fight would be the way to go. Unfortunately, I don't think that Keith Thurman is going to win that fight. I don't think there's a high probability of it, but we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's pretty much all I got for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.